I was a teenager, the fact that adults were the largest demographic of gamers was cited as an alarming trend. Video games were, and may still be, considered child's play. I don't play video games much anymore, but I do recognize the value that can be found in them. As I share a few stories from my younger days, I'll highlight the lessons that can be drawn from them. Video games might be child's play, but they also hold the capacity to prepare one for the realities of life, if you are paying attention. The first game I remember playing was Mario Brothers. I was couched by a friend as I pushed red buttons on a gray and black rectangular controller. "Those guys will kill you! Jump! Hurry!" my friend told me. The little mushroom-shaped object with eyes didn't look threatening, but for some reason, if he bumped into Mario, Mario would jump through the ground and off the screen, and that would be the end of that round. I had to jump onto the mushroom guy's head and mash him away. Why the little mushroom guy didn't get bumped off the screen if I bumped into him wasn't explained to me. It just was the way it was. "Okay, now don't fall down into that pit. You have to jump over it," my friend explained. "You have to hold down B to turn and then press A to jump," he continued. No amount of explanation was going to prepare me for the perfect execution of that move. Trial and error was going to have to run its course. Pun intended. I jumped too early, and down I went, into the abyss of digital death. "Don't worry," my friend assured. "You've got 2 more lives." I started over, cautiously past the mushroom freak. Hit a few boxes to collect points and tried for the jump again. "Yes!" I exclaimed, but quickly stopped to assess the dangers that lurked thereafter. I'm not sure how many times it took me to get through level 1, but when I finally did, it was a glorious victory. Mario scaled the flagpole and ran through the exit. When I supervised 4th through 6th grades, my students would tell me that they weren't good at a particular subject. I responded by saying that I wasn't good at walking when I first started either. I explained that I fell more than a few times. I told them it was a good thing I didn't give up, because walking comes quite handy these days. The point was never lost on them. I remember the smiles I got as they didn't have a rebuttal to that. The truth is that we aren't good at everything, but in 5th grade, we can get better at most things, and we shouldn't limit ourselves by saying we just aren't good at a particular subject. Eventually, we have to pick what to pursue because we can't be good at everything. There just isn't enough time. That said, no one is good at something until they've worked at it a while. That while might be a different span for different people, but we've got to give it some time and effort when we find a skill worth acquiring. Recently, I heard someone say, "Many people are willing to put forth effort, but most people aren't willing to put forth time." I'll end this thought with a more familiar quote. "If at first you don't succeed, try again." Or in other words, losing leads to learning. Caesar 3 might be the game that I spent the most time on growing up. Hours and hours were spent building city after city after city. My job as the city manager working under Caesar's empire was to meet certain requirements for a given city. You could also play in free mode, which I mostly did, after several lower levels of working with Caesar and his demands. The houses would upgrade themselves if you provided enough resources around them. Those houses would then pay more taxes, which would fund your building projects. You could also build trade routes with other cities and exchange your city's excess of goods for goods that you couldn't create yourself. Pleasing the gods was also part of the game, and you could accomplish this by building temples to them, but I always disabled that feature because I didn't believe in any other gods. Besides, Caesar thought he was God, and I got rid of him by playing free mode, and therefore that made me God. You would think the whole point of the game was to build a city and have a city that was complete, but the truth was that the finished work wasn't the point at all. Once your city was built and functioning, the only thing left to do was to watch the numbers change. Starting over and building a city from the ground up was more fun and satisfying than sitting there and watching a self-sufficient city run. We tend to get so focused on the end game, the goal in life, that we miss the whole point of the process. It's the journey that makes the game enjoyable, not the destination. There is no destination in life either. Enjoy the journey and take pleasure in the process. Warcraft 2 was one of my favorite games. I only ever played Warcraft 2. I never played the first one or any version after that. Warcraft 3 had no demo version that I could try out first. I only bought games that I could try out first. Besides that, Warcraft was all online, and I didn't quite understand the concept. Turns out that game I refused to buy because I didn't trust it without a test run became the most popular game in history. I missed out on being a part of that. It really doesn't bother me at all, but it is an interesting irony. The story of Warcraft, the first version, was the invasion of the ugly orcs into human land. The humans barely fought them off. This time, in Warcraft 2, the humans are on offense. That was the story of Warcraft 2, an offensive strike against the orcs. The game wouldn't really make sense if you didn't understand that there was a conflict between these two civilizations. Having a second edition to the game wouldn't be necessary without the backstory that gave reason to it. Without the backstory, there was no game. Without the conflict, there was no story. The struggle was the story, and the story was the game. Minigame stories were so compelling that Hollywood made them into movies. Warcraft was one of them. The stories that outlive their own times, the stories that become timeless, are the ones that have great struggles built into them. The best ones even have ironic outcomes. The story of a couple who couldn't have children giving birth to a nation is the Jewish story. A small struggling civilization wanting to govern itself and throwing off the control of the biggest empire in the history of the world is the story of the United States, who ironically became an even greater empire than the one it threw off. What's the story of your life? People often cite the phrase, "the story of my life," when they experience a recurring struggle that sets them back repetitively. A friend of mine once told me, the obstacle is the way. In other words, what is holding you back is the key to moving forward. What is holding you back? Finances? Health? Relationships? The very thing that is holding you back is likely the key to moving forward. Find a way to overcome it. Make it your main focus. He that overcometh, the same shall be saved. Your struggle is your story. Make it a great one by turning it into a victory. GTO was a racing simulation game. This wasn't just any racing game. The physics of this game were as realistic as one could expect at the time. Races weren't played in laps, but in time. The more time you raced, the more money you could get. With that money came upgrades, new cars. You could pick 20 minutes to an hour. There was no way I was going to commit to an hour of racing around a track, so I usually picked 20 minutes. The thing was that if you crashed, your car didn't just magically reappear on the road, fixed for you to continue. It didn't even reappear in the next race like brand new. It would appear the same way you left it from the last race, unless you paid to have it fixed in the shop. As the time ticked down, my intensity would build. One bad turn could ruin the whole thing, and a few times it did. The wipeout was devastating. I had to learn to balance optimal speed with the successful completion of each turn. The lesson of taking safe turns was imprinted on my brain so hard that when I started driving in a real car, I was extra careful on the turns. Often in life, we don't quite understand what the stakes are until it's too late. Sometimes there are no do-overs. Once we recognize how high the stakes are, we can adjust our attention and effort accordingly. Focus, effort, and time are some of the tools to get us to the outcome that we are looking for. All the knowledge, wisdom, and wit one could hope to have can be voided out completely if one isn't focusing their attention on the right thing. Autopilot and inattentiveness are the ingredients that have made victims out of many people. Be intentional. Don't just let life happen to you. Pay attention, or you'll pay the price. My brother Sam and I and our mutual friend John would network play against each other. On Saturdays, we'd have our Mountain Dew available and become absorbed into the digital world. You can guess that when there's an odd number, alliances will inevitably form. Poor John was stuck in the middle. We tried to keep from forming unfair alliances, but it was either that or no combat. The alternative was that we would all just build up our forces and never attack. Eventually, someone had to attack, or the game was meaningless. Whoever attacked first was vulnerable to the other guy. John and I made a secret agreement one day that we would team up against Sam. After eliminating him, we would turn on each other. Sam didn't take too well to that. Once the military forces from both of us came knocking, he abruptly shut off the computer and stormed out in a fury. John and my plan was tactically solid, but it was socially frail. We needed a better solution to our problem of odd numbers. We needed a common enemy. We added some artificial players to the game. Artificial intelligence would be our enemy. All three of us could coordinate our advancements out loud and request help if attacked. Collaborating against a common enemy brought us back into harmony and prevented anyone's feelings from being hurt. There is no such thing as a self-made man or person. Anyone who does anything in life has to work with other people. Elon Musk expressed this principle by saying there was no way he could ever build a rocket without the help of his SpaceX team. He might be a genius and be responsible for the design, funding, and organization, but without the lesser talented people who actually put those rockets together, it would all just be a nice idea in history. Winning at the expense of others is a short game that doesn't play in the long term. Helping others win will get you further and add fulfillment. Collaboration is key. Before Sam, John, and I found our common enemy against AI, Sam and John took turns against me. It was a much fairer fight than when John and I ganged up on Sam. There was only one way to win against those odds. The weakness that we all had was that we found pleasure in the process. It was fun finding gold mines and other resources and buildings at a moderate pace. What wasn't as fun was rushing through that process. Sam and John expected that we would all take our time and work up to the fight. The only way I could win was to work fast and strike first. As they invested in gathering resources, I began building an army as soon as possible. Before they even had any security at all, I was attacking. "You can't attack me!" Sam exclaimed in panic. "We just started and I don't even have an army yet!" I wasn't going to win against two opponents by playing nice. The forces continued to come, and Sam was wiped out without a trace of resistance. Once again, Sam abruptly shut off the computer and stormed out. All is fair in love and war, and this was all war and no love. There may be a time and place to stop and smell the roses, but for some things you'll need to stay focused to flourish. Anything worth having is worth working for, and the things worth working for don't typically just arrive in your living room one day from Santa Claus. The little guy can't get ahead because he's only working the minimum, or spending all his hard work on payments and interest that extend past the foreseeable future. He's not getting ahead because he's not in his head. He's sedating his consciousness with hours of TV every night and all 48 hours of the weekend when he's not sleeping off a hangover. Stop to smell the roses after the finish line. Then compare the smell of the roses to the smell of a victory. The aroma of triumph is a scent that no rose can emit. Within the game driver, you had to pick up bad guys and transport them to different locations. I didn't play much of the actual game because I only had the demo version, and free mode let me drive around aimlessly as long as I wanted. I could pick one of the available cars and cities and just drive around town without the obligation that came with the narrative part of the game. There were still some limitations that kept me from getting that top speed that I wanted to achieve. Another problem came when a cop caught you speeding or running into cars. They would just keep crashing you until you were trapped. You could lose them for a while, but you were always on their radar and would eventually have to run or get caught. Then something amazing happened. Cheat codes. Cheat codes changed the virtual world. You could be immune to cops or change the laws of physics. You could make your car invincible and damage-free no matter what. With infinite mass mode, other cars would just bounce off you like balloons. You could even drive through buildings. If you added all the cheat codes, you could get that top speed that was so elusive before. Cars, cops, and buildings were no longer an obstacle. Then something profound happened that taught me a lesson I have never forgotten. About 5 minutes after I cheat coded my way into God car mode, there wasn't much left of the game that interested me. The limitations of buildings, the limitations of traffic, the limitations of physics were all features, not flaws. It was the friction that made the game interesting. Once that was taken away, hours of interest holding fun evaporated into mere minutes of amusement. There was no going back. I never played the game again. Most of us would just love to take all the friction out of life. It's our universal dream to free ourselves of hard work, pain, problems, and heartache. Yet what video games taught me, and indeed reality teaches people who have actually made it to these pinnacles of life, is that it isn't always a panacea on the other side of that friction-free paradise. There needs to be something to strive for. There needs to be a challenge. There needs to be meaning, and meaning manifests itself from the other side of struggle. It isn't a coincidence that many very ambitious billionaires continue to work long past their fortunes. Bill Gates is taking on tough problems of poverty in the world. He's not doing this because this is his way of relaxing. The hard work, the struggle, the overcoming of problems are what bring meaning to his life. Elon Musk was a millionaire very early on in life. He could be vacationing on any beach in the world, yet he works some 80 hours a week. He does so because he derives more meaning from life by taking on the biggest struggles he can find. These aren't just outliers either. So many people who make it to financial independence and wealth end up continuing to work and do something productive with their lives. If they don't pursue meaning from challenges, which inevitably includes pain and difficulty, they often end up in a downward spiral that ends in drug overdose. Pain, struggle, and hardship are features in life, not flaws. Friction is a feature, not a flaw. Embrace the friction and make it meaningful.
I just bought the coolest thing on Amazon, had it delivered to my house, and I want to share it with you. Here's what it is. For the longest time, when I'm in my car and I have to blow my nose, I just don't have a place to put a tissue box. They don't make cars for rectangular or box tissue boxes. So I thought there's got to be something that would work in my car that I could buy that would be very convenient. And boy, this very inexpensive thing has been so satisfying for me. So here's what we have. This comes in 4. And you can get it in different colors. My charger happens to be black on the inside, silver on the out. So I got the black model for $9.99. So that's like $2.50 per tissue box. And you know, how often are you going to need it? So, but when you do, it's there. And red, pink, blue, and black. So that's what you can see on there. What I have is a link below. It is an affiliate link. I've got some pictures of it in my car that I'm going to include here as well. And you just put it in a cup holder. So it comes with 4 of these in a package. I've taken them out and I've put them in the car. I take it with me when I drive the semi truck around. You just pop that out and then it becomes a tissue box. You just put it in your holder. I put it in the door of my car, and I also have it on the other side for my wife. If you have kids, you could put it in the holders there, and there you go. There's your tissue. So go ahead and click that link in the below. Get yours today, and tell me how long they last. Look at, they're all in there. It's very, very convenient. And they come in 4 colors. So hope you enjoy that.
Pray. Let's pray. Heavenly Father,